Hey friends, it's Loree with the blog Homestead.com, and I'm here today to show you how to grow beets from seed to harvest. So here is my fall planting of beets. I'm also going to show you how I planted my spring beets. So it's the exact same process, spring or fall. Beets are something that like to grow when it's cold, and so you can plant them early in the spring and grow them into the summer. Then you can plant them again. For me in zone 4B in Nebraska, we plant them in August and then grow them on into the early winter. These beets are about 75 days old. There are some bigger ones in there as well. Anyway, they're a great superfood to have around, and we're also going to show you how to pickle these. So this is a jar of pickled beets from this year, and I just ran in and got it off my pantry shelf. We're going to show you how we pickled these this summer, but we're going to start off by showing you how to plant beets. So beets are really simple to grow. I suggest that you do all your growing in your garden on a 30-inch wide bed, and what that means is you're going to be able to fit 3 rows of beets. So there's 3 rows of beets here in this 30-inch wide bed. And this bed happens to be 50 feet long, and so that produces an awful lot of beets. And so I'm going to show you how we plant them, and then really all you do is let them grow. I water my garden, and you'll see some other videos on that with drip line, and so you can water them with a sprinkler too. It doesn't really matter. So you just water them. I usually have to weed them once, and eventually then this foliage comes up high enough that it blocks out any new weeds. The other blessing about growing things in the spring and the fall is that you'll have less weed pressure when it's cool. For some of you that grow farther south than me, you can actually grow beets all winter. Okay, so that's a really, really awesome thing. Most root crops can be grown in the winter. So anyway, we're going to show you how to grow these, how to preserve them, and then eating them is easy. They're so, so good. So anyway, come along with me today, and we'll show you all about beets. I'm going to use this bed rake, 30 inches wide. I've got my beds measured out, you can kind of see, and I have my walkway right here in the middle. And what I'm going to do for the beets, I'm going to grow them 3 rows wide, and I have these neat little measuring sticks. You can also get these from Johnny's Seeds, and I'm going to just measure out, put 3 of them here. Let me see, that one's in 3, this one's in 3, 2, 4, 6, 2, 4, 5. That's about perfect. Okay, and I'm going to use these to mark out my rows in the bed for the beets, and then I can just drop the beet seeds about every inch or 2, and then sometimes you have to thin the beets. But honestly, what I find is if you pick the beets that are medium sized and ready to eat, then there's always some little seeds, because in a beet seed, sometimes there's 2 or 3 seeds in one seed. Like sometimes it grows more than one plant. And so you'll always have smaller beets coming along. And I find that if I plant my beets every inch or 2, I don't actually have to succession plant them in order to have them all summer, because if I pick the medium to large sized that's ready first, then it gives room for the smaller little ones that are coming along to fill out, and I end up with beets all summer long. So we love to make pickled beets and all different kinds of beets. So all right, I'm going to mark out the spot for the beets. It's 3 rows wide in a 30-inch wide bed. There, sort of straight, pretty straight. So now I'm just going to go along and seed the beets, and they will be planted for the year. The reason I don't grow grow beets and carrots on fabric, of course, is because they're grown so close together there really wouldn't be a way to do it. So they do require cultivating and weeding until they get their foliage grown up enough that they shade out the weeds. But if most of my garden is on fabric, then obviously I can find time to weed a couple of crops. The variety of beets I'm planting are Red Ace. These are from Johnny's Seed. And again, I'm just gonna put them in a ranch or two and cover them with about a ½ inch to an inch of soil. And then hopefully the rain this afternoon will help them to germinate quickly. I'm just going to go along and cover them over with just a little bit of soil and lightly compact it so that it has good connection with the soil. Hey friends, so it's beet harvest day or beet pickling day. We try to do that only once a year because it does make kind of a mess. It's not hard to pickle beets if you've never pickled them before. But what we did is we harvested off of that bed of beets that we planted all summer long and sold all the beets at farmer's market. And we had a few that the kids they were big beets. The kids did not want to harvest. They wanted to wait and pickle them and see how big they would get. So I don't know how much these weigh, but they weigh a lot. Anyways, hopefully they're not woody on the inside. They probably aren't. And then we have a few that a mole has come by and chewed on. So anyway, it's no big deal. We'll just cut this part out. What we're going to do to pickle these beets is we're going to scrub them up really good. And we're going to cook them. I'm probably going to cut some of the bigger beets into smaller pieces just so that they cook more evenly. We're going to cook them until they're soft. Then we're going to peel off the outside skin. Okay, then we're going to cut them into pieces, bite-sized pieces like you'd put into the jar for pickled beets. And then we're going to mix up the brine and cook them in the brine till they're hot. And we're gonna put the beets and the brine into jars like simmering hot, and they're gonna self-seal. So the process for, heating them up and stuff is, it's a bit of a process, right? But we are not gonna have to actually run these all through a water bath canner. You can if you want, you totally can. I just have done this for a long time and it works really well. These are one of our very favorite things to eat in the winter alongside lots of different dishes. And so we're gonna see how many beets we can get pickled out of this wagon load here of beets, and I think we have a few more as well. So come along and we will show you how we preserve our beets. All right, so the girls are scrubbing. This is just an outdoor sink that we have, and I just fill it up with clean water. And we're scrubbing any dirt off the beets. You don't want any dirt left on the beets because you're going to be using the liquid off the beets for actually part of the pickling liquid. And then we're just cutting them, the really big ones, we're just cutting them into beet-sized pieces so that they kind of cook evenly. Now we're putting them in a pot of water on the stove. You don't have to take off the tops or anything as long as they're scrubbed clean, but I'm not going to cut out, I'm just going to cut out the area here where the mole chewed on the beet. So I'm just going to trim it just like this. And if it was a regular small beet, then I would not cut it up. I would just put the whole beet right in the water. But because these are so big, I am going to cut them so they don't take all day to cook. are the pieces that we cooked in water. Okay, we just covered them with water and cooked them. And I have another batch going in that same water now. I just scooped these off, and I'll try to show you that too, but I just scooped these out with this little scooper and put them in this bowl so that they can cool. And then all you do, really easy, is you just slide the peel off. It's very simple. And this top part, see we left the tops on, it just slides right off also. It just comes right off without any trouble, and the peeling comes off. And then we just cut them into bite-sized pieces. So the kids are helping me here.
Like that.
Yep. So then we just cut them into bite-sized pieces. They should be tender. You know, you just cook them until they're tender. That's how long you cook them. So how long that is depends on the size of your beets. But when you can stick a fork into them, then that's good enough. And then you just cut them up, bite-sized pieces that will fit into a jar, okay? And I'm gonna use narrow mouth quart jars for this. So once we get all of these chopped and we're done cooking the rest of the beets, which they're cooking right over here. So when we're done cooking the rest of these beets and peeling them, then we will mix up the brine and start putting everything back on the stove to get hot, and then we'll put them in jars. Alright, so here's a big bowl of beets. Those still need to be peeled. But anyways, what I'm going to do is get ready to make the brine for these. So to know how much brine to make, you're going to measure these beets out. Now, if I knew how big this bowl was, I would already know. I think it's 20 quart, but I'm not for sure. So I'm going to measure. This is a 4-cup measuring cup. So 4 cups is about what will fit into a quart jar. And for every quart jar, I'm going to need about 2 cups of brine, if that makes sense. And again, the full recipe for this will be on the blog wagonwheelhomestead.com. But I'm just going to take these beets and I'm going to measure them right here back into my pot. And I'm going to see how many cups of beets I get, and that will tell me how much brine I need to add to this pot. And we're going to cook it in the brine, and then we will, once it's hot, we'll put it right into the jars. Okay, and by the way, in case you missed it earlier when I said we're going to save the liquid that we cooked the beets in, so I'm just pouring it all into a big 5-gallon bucket for now because I'm going to use it in making the pickle liquid or the brine. but I want to see how much is fitting in each one of these pots, obviously. And this one fit 18 quarts of beets, so we'll see how much will fit in here. This is also going to give us an idea of how many jars that we need to have washed up and ready. Okay, so for my one pot I have 18 quarts of beets in it, and I need 2 cups per quart, which means I need 36 cups of brine. Okay, and it's equal parts vinegar, beet juice, okay, that we cooked the beets in, the beet water, and sugar. So that's 12 cups of each will equal 36 cups. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in 12 cups of beet juice. Okay. And this is going to get us close. We may need a little more. This may be a little more than we need, but you know, you have to get it somewhat close. You don't want buckets of brine left over. Neither do you want to be way short, but you just, you know, do what you can, right? Okay, so 12 cups. And the great thing about this beet juice is that it's still hot. The reason I'm not pouring it right on the beets is because I want this sugar to dissolve before I, you know, dump it in, because the pot's full enough I really can't stir it very well. And I'm known for boiling things over, but hopefully it'll be okay. We are outside, so anyway. All right, 6. So I need 12 cups of sugar. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, and I'm going to need 12 cups of vinegar. So I'll just measure this out. There's 4, 8, 12 cups of vinegar. Okay, and we're just going to stir it well. There's one of those bees that gets in everything. They love sugar and they sense that fall is coming. And then I was canning apples out here, so then the bees really find you when you can the apples. So I'm just mixing this well, and I'm just going to pour it over those beets and then turn it on and get them to cook in this. And when it's simmering, you know, at a good rolling boil, a good simmering boil, then we're just going to stick them right in the jars, put the lids on, and put the rings on as quickly as possible and let them self-seal. Okay, and I may have overestimated just a little bit, which happens because my pot is getting full. That's fine. I'm just getting some of the sugar out here that didn't quite. So I'm just going to call that good. And we can always mix up a little brine at the end if we need it, but that's probably going to be just fine because we're going to have it packed fairly tightly into the jars. So I'm going to just turn this on. And then I'll mix up the brine for this other batch of beets. And what I have left over of brine we'll probably just use on the last little bit. Okay, the beets are at a good rolling boil. So I am going to quickly ladle them, juice and all, into jars and put lids on. And it's really helpful if you do this with 2 people. One person can be ladling beets into jars and one person can be putting lids on. And the reason it's safe to do this and not water bath them is because they're pickled and they're in such an acidic environment that there's no way botulism will ever be able to grow in these. So this is a great way to do it, and then you don't have to spend all night running these through the canner. and you'll want to wipe the rim of your jar really quick, whoever's putting lids on. Put the lid on, put the ring on, tighten it down. There you go. That's gonna seal. So we're gonna get the rest of these in jars here quickly, and then we'll let you know how many quarts we end up with. Well, we ended up with, can you guess? 51 quarts of pickled beets. So I had my husband help me. We just put the beets in as quickly as we could, put the lids on. And if you have any that don't seal, you can run them through and water bath them for 10 or 15 minutes just to get them hot enough that the lids will seal, but most of them usually do seal, especially if you use the 4 jars canning lids. So that's something that you for sure are going to want to use. They seal so much better, for me at least, and I think for a lot of others, than regular ball or Kerr canning lids that we've used all these years. I really love the 4 jars lids, and I'll put a link for those in the description box below. So anyway, that's how we grow beets from seed to harvest, and then this is how we preserve them. And be sure to check out the blog wagonwheelhomestead.com for lots of other recipes and tips and tricks on how to grow beets and how to eat them fresh. There's so many things you can do with beets. And by the way, if you've ever had anybody tell you, well, I really don't like beets, generally it is because they've eaten beets grown in poor soil. So beets grown in poor soil taste like dirt, okay? And if you grow beets that are in properly amended, healthy, organic soil, they taste so good. In fact, my kids yesterday were like, Mom, can we just eat some of these plain before we put the pickling brine on them? And they're so good. So, you know, cook them up, put some butter on them, right? Just eat them plain. Beets are a superfood, and you should be eating lots of them. You can eat them raw, put them in salads, or juice them, right? But our favorite way to preserve them for year-round eating is by pickling them. So if you like this video, if you want to learn more about growing, preserving, cooking from scratch, sourdough and home dairy, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, and we will see you in the next video.